So we're going to talk about the two different ways to graph a line that we discussed yesterday. So for this first one, this is slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. The number in front of x is your slope, and the b value is at the end. So for this equation, what is the slope? What is the slope of this equation? Negative 2/3. Let's go ahead and write that. Because it's negative, that means we're going to go down 2 and write 3. This is homework 4. And this is also, remember, homework 4 is due tomorrow. The b value is 4. So what I want you to do is on the y-axis, which this is your y-axis, put a point at 4. 4 is positive 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, that would be right here. Go ahead, put a point at positive 4 on the y-axis. And then from that point, I want you to hop down 2 and then to the right 3. Put a point. So we're going to go down 2, right 3, put a point, down 2, right 3, put a point, and now draw a line. And that is graph. So there's 3 different ways. One way would be to graph using a table. Another way is to use your slope and y-intercept. And the third method is to find the x and y-intercept. You need help finding it? So it's the bell work packet. It should be... And then the second way to graph would be to use your x and y intercepts. So when you're finding your x-intercept, x-intercept, I want you to just cover up the y. So this part, you're just going to take it out. And if you take that out, you're left with negative 2x equals 10. How do you solve that for x? What do you have to do on both sides of your equation to get rid of this negative 2? Daniel.
Negative 2 on both sides.
And how do we do that, though? Are we adding it, subtracting it, multiplying, or dividing? Dividing. So let's divide both sides by negative 2. So in your calculator, x equals 10 divided by negative 2. And 10 divided by negative 2 is negative 5. So your x-intercept is at negative 5, 0. Go ahead and plot a point right there at negative 5 on the x-axis. So your y-intercept now you're not covering up the y, you're actually going to cover up x. So now I'm going to cross this part out. So that leaves me with 5y equals 10. How do you solve that for y? What are you going to do to both sides? Divide by 5. Good. 10 divided by 5 is y equals 2. So your y-intercept is at 0, 2. Put a point at 0, 2. And now you're going to draw a line that connects, a straight line that connects through those two. And that is your graphs. All right, go to page 13 in your note packet.
I think we already did page 13.
Oh, isn't that page 13?
We already did it, 'cause if this is 12, this is 13. There's no number down.
Oh, so go to the next page.
Next, so it's, 14.
So page 14, is that where that is? Page 14.
Yeah.
All right. Go to page 14 in the notes. So now you're going to the notes. So we're talking about inequalities. Oops, did I lose my paper? All right, so there's 4 different types of inequalities that we're going to talk about. The first one, this means less than. When it's less than, because it doesn't have the solid line under it, when we graph it, it's going to be dashed. And we're going to shade below. Our second one is greater than. And can you put in front of each one of these, I forgot to have you do that, put a Y in front of each one of these inequalities, because that makes a difference. So if it's greater than, we still graph it with a dashed line, except now because it's greater than, we're going to shade above. Notice that the next two have a solid line underneath the inequality. That means an equal to. When you see a solid line, we graph it with a solid line. So this is going to be a solid line, and this one is solid. So that third one means less than and equal. So we would graph that one with a solid line, but we would still graph it, we would still shade below. And the fourth one is greater The fourth one is greater than and equal. It has a solid line, but now we're going to shade above. And these are our 4 types of inequalities. We're on page, I think, what did we say we're on again? 14? Page 14 in our note packet. All right, so let's go ahead and start graphing these out. For example 4, this is not in slope-intercept form. So we need to solve it for y. So we need to get y by itself. So we're going to have 12 minus 4y is greater than x. Actually, I'm going to solve it over here because I need a little bit more space. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 12 from both sides, which gives you a negative 4y is greater than x minus 12. And now that negative 4 is being multiplied, so I have to divide every single term by negative 4. When you divide by a negative, you have to flip the inequality. So it's not going to be greater than anymore. It's going to be less than. There's an invisible 1 in front of this x. So your equation becomes y, and instead of greater than is less than negative 1/4 x. And when you divide two numbers that are both negative, see here we're dividing a positive by a negative, so it stayed negative. Here I'm dividing a negative and a negative, so it becomes positive. So my slope is negative 1/4, and my y-intercept is 3. Now, because the slope is negative, I'm going to go down 1 and right 4. What kind of boundary line am I going to use? So let's look at this. See how this says less than? If we look here, we said that for less than, we use a dashed line and we shade below. So when I graph it, let's go ahead and graph it. Let's put a point at 3. And then from that point, go down 1 to the right 4. And this time when you draw your line, you have to lift your pencil up. It should be a dashed line. So this is a dashed line. Dashed. And I'm going to shade below. So I'm going to shade below. So that would be all of this area underneath the line. For inequality, you have to shade. And that would be your graph. So for question number 4 on homework 4, that one has inequalities. So you have to shade. Yeah. All right, let's look at our next example. Let's look at example 5. For example 5, this is already in slope-intercept form. So your slope is this number right here, which is -1/2. So -1/2 is my slope. Because it's negative, I'm going to go down 1, right 2. My y-intercept is 3. So let's go ahead and put a point at +3. Go down 1 to the right 2, down 1 to the right 2. Now, what kind of a boundary am I going to use? Is it solid or dashed? And if you're not sure, look back at page 14. Solid. And the way I like to remember that is if there's a solid line under it, then that means we graph it with a solid line. So this time we do not need to lift our pencils. You're going to draw a solid line going through your points. So this is a solid line. Now this says less than and equal to. So we're going to shade below. So I'm going to shade below. Yes.
When will we ever have to shade above?
So we shade above when it is a greater than or greater than and equal to.
Oh, I see. Okay, I see.
Yep. Yes. Yes. I'll put it up at the end. All right, and then our last one here. Let's go ahead and solve this for x. So we have to do some work. This is not ready to graph yet. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 4x. And then to get rid of that -2, we're going to divide every single number by negative. You only flip the inequality when you divide by a negative. If I was dividing by a +2, I would not flip it. But I'm dividing by a negative. So this becomes y. And this is going to flip from a less than to a greater than and equal to. When you divide -4 by -2, what is -4 divided by -2? If you're not sure, use your calculator. Take -4 divided by -2. +2 plus, and then when you take +8 divided by -2, you get a -4. So your slope is 2 over 1. So I'm going to go up 2, right 1, and my y-intercept is -4. All right, you guys ready to graph? So let's put a point at -4. And from that point, I want you to go up 2 to the right 1, up 2 to the right 1, And what kind of a boundary line am I going to draw it with? A solid line or a dashed line? Solid, because it has a solid line under it. So this is solid. And I know my line is not straight. Let me see if I can do better, because that's just really crooked. There we go. That's a little bit better. Okay. Now, where do I shade on this graph? Above or below? Above, because this is greater than. See how this is a greater than inequality? So because it's greater than, I'm going to shade above. Greater than faces towards the right. So let's look here, going back to that first page. Greater than faces towards the right, and less than faces to the left. That's how I remember it. Okay, so now we're going to shade above, so that would be all of this area. This is above the graph.